Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee has recently retired from the Indian Foreign Service. Before she retired, she was Indian ambassador to the Netherlands, and she was also the chairperson of the Executive Council of the OPCW. She is here with us today. It's a great pleasure, madam, to welcome you. Maybe if we could start with a few questions about your experience at the OPCW.
Thank you, Arvind. It's a pleasure to be here. It's the first time I'm in such an event after my retirement. Indeed, my experience with the OPCW was a continuation of the interest and involvement I had in strategic affairs from the time I joined service. I did the UN Disarmament Fellowship in 1984, and I've always taken a keen interest in strategic issues. But chemical weapons and the regime and how the regime is now coping with new emerging challenges was something which I had not experienced until I came to Netherlands, and I must say I thoroughly enjoyed the experience of chairing the council at a very difficult time when it was confronting new challenges from Libya and then Syria.
Could you tell us something about these new challenges? What was happening at OPCW when there was the fighting going on in Libya?
Well, the first thing that happened was that the Libyan ambassador, who had been accredited by Gaddafi, changed sides. That's the first thing that happened. The next thing that happened was that we had to confront the whole issue of new discoveries of chemical weapons stockpiles in Libya, which the Gaddafi regime had not declared and which the new regime said it was not aware of. So that was a challenge. We've now been able to surmount that. We have gone back to destroying the stockpiles declared by Gaddafi, following which a program of verifiable destruction will be worked out for the newly discovered stockpiles.
So Libya is behind us, and OPCW can take some credit for having resolved this issue successfully. But what about Syria? I mean, in Syria, the situation is developing very rapidly, and there are allegations that the one side or the other has used the chemical weapons. What role can OPCW play? How do you think the Syrian situation is developing?
I think that it's important to remember, Arvind, that there are differences between Libya and Syria. First of all, because Libya was always a state party, Syria is not. And because in the Libyan case, there were reliable reports that the chemical weapons had not been weaponized, which obviously does not seem to be the case in the Syrian case. Now, as far as the role of OPCW is concerned, it is important to also remember that the mandate of the inspectors is to establish if chemical weapons have been used, not who has used the chemical weapons. And in fact, from that perspective, the role that OPCW can play in first establishing that chemical weapons have been used, and then in ensuring that if, as now seems possible, the regime will ratify the convention and allow its stockpiles to be destroyed, in that case you would have a resolution of the issue without getting into this highly polemical question of how and where the chemical weapons were used and by whom. You are in a situation where you would not have any stockpiles in Syria once they have been destroyed under verifiable destruction.
Ma'am, what do you think of the Russian proposal? Do you think it has a chance of succeeding?
Well, I think the Russian proposal has come at a very opportune time. And I don't know if you've read, Arvind, the very interesting letter which President Putin has put in the New York Times this morning, addressed to the American people. But it certainly makes a very interesting case, arguing for a solution rather than unilateral military action, no matter how justified it may seem. The Russian proposal, which could be fleshed out further, and I'm sure that would happen in New York, actually brings about a situation by which the regime will ratify the convention, will make an initial declaration which would have listed all its chemical weapon production facilities, its stockpiles, and would invite the OPCW to send a team. The team would then verify and ensure that the declaration is accurate, and then encourage the regime to work with the OPCW to bring about a program of verifiable destruction, which, after approval by the Executive Council, could then commence immediately thereafter provided that adequate security is given to the team when it actually proceeds with the process of verification of destruction. That's very important also, to ensure that adequate security is given by the regime. That can be worked out.
You have been part of some inspections. Could you tell us how inspections are done and what is the procedure involved?
It's very complex and very well established. It's been detailed in the annex to the convention. I actually went for an inspection which had, at the invitation of the US government, the Executive Council was sent a team. We went to 3 sites in the US, and we were in fact extremely impressed by the manner in which the US government has organized its destruction program under verification. But we also understood how complex the issues are. For instance, in one particular site, the Americans were going to move these chemical weapons to another site for destruction, when the local community and the civil society protested and said that it is dangerous to move these chemical weapons from one site to another in case of an accident. So the US government then had to build a new chemical weapon destruction facility around that site. So these are all very complex issues because they are also hugely expensive. A chemical weapon production facility, destruction facility is hugely expensive and has to be done very carefully, keeping in mind the environment, the local safety, the safety of the inspectors, and the importance of verification of destruction. So I must say that after having seen what I saw in the US, I had a better perspective of how complex the whole issue is, and one can then understand the Syria issue better, because if we are going to destroy those chemical weapon production facilities, we would have to work out a program of destruction, but we would also have to provide the destruction facilities to the Syrian authorities so as to have safe and expeditious destruction of their chemical weapons and their chemical weapons production facilities.
If I may touch upon the UN Security Council Resolution 1540. Syria is not a member of the Chemical Weapons Convention, but UNSCR 1540 applies to all states. Now, what are the responsibilities that the Syrians have under 1540, and whether this is applicable to the current situation?
As you know, Arvind, the difference between a UN Security Council resolution and a UNGA resolution is that a UN Security Council resolution is binding on all members of the UN. So it's binding on Syria. 1540 is very clear. The state has absolute responsibility to ensure that WMDs don't fall into the hands of terrorists or non-state actors. That is an absolute obligation. It is binding on all governments, and that would include the Syrian government.
Perhaps I could ask you another question about India's engagement with the OPCW. You are also Indian ambassador to the OPCW. Could you tell us what has been the Indian experience in dealing with the OPCW, and particularly with regard to the destruction of our own stockpiles?
Well, you know, India is completely committed to a disarmament organization, because we've always believed in general and complete disarmament. The OPCW is the only UN disarmament organization. We have been fully supportive. We were one of the founding fathers of the convention, one of the first to ratify. Our small stockpiles we destroyed under verification within the time frame, and in fact we have chaired the Executive Council twice. We had the honor of chairing it the very first time under Ambassador Prabhakar Menon 15 years ago, and then it came back to me 15 years later. So in fact we are one of the very few countries in OPCW that have had the honor of chairing the Executive Council twice, and we are very well respected. We have one of the largest chemical industries, and our chemical industry and the way it respects the norms of the convention have been cited as a example for other countries to follow within OPCW by states parties whenever we debate these issues. So I think I'm very proud of the fact that India has a great role to play and has actually shown the way forward as a major developing country and as a major player.
May I also ask you to tell us a little bit about the capacities in India. You mentioned about that we have done very well, and the Indian example is cited very often. But you are sitting in the Strategic Research Institute, Strategic Affairs Research Institute. What are the areas for future research that you think in India we should be focusing on? So far as chemical weapons are concerned.
The OPCW has a scientific advisory board where India has always had a member. This scientific advisory board actually has on its agenda issues either given by the Director General or issues that it believes should be discussed for future. One of this is whether the convention which was negotiated 15 years ago is still in a capacity to look at future challenges, future scientific challenges. And why do I say that? Because there is this whole possibility of new WMDs emerging which would combine biological and chemical. So the SAB in fact is grappling with this issue, but more than SAB, the Executive Council is discussing internally how to make the convention cope with the fast developments in technology which might result one day, maybe 20 years from now, in a convention dealing with a situation which was 20 years old and challenges coming up which respond to the new technological developments of the future. So India is doing just the same, and in fact India's member on SAB has always played a very important role in ensuring that the scientific debate within OPCW keeps pace with these developments.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a very informative interview, and we thank you for coming to the IDSA and sharing your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arvind, for inviting me.